Meantime, again, one of those stories that flies under the radar as we all get on with our lives, have other things to do, like the mini skip, moving house, or anything else you had to do this weekend. Well, there was a meeting of the National Energy Ministers, the great brains trust of people who believe coal-fired power, bad, renewables, awesome, who cares who pays for it? Eventually, of course, it will be you, the customer. But what they decided to do was, in part, make part of the national energy market that one of the responsibilities of the national energy market is decarbonisation. So rather than keeping the lights on, part of the way they manage the market, they decide who can and can't produce electricity, what can and can't be bought, at what price, and all the rest of it, now is about decarbonisation. This, of course, has been referred to again in the Turnbull Times as a potential backdooring and the first steps towards a carbon price, i.e., if your power comes from naughty coal or gas, you will pay more. And if it comes from renewables, you would potentially be charged less, despite the fact that it's going to take $1 trillion to build all of the stuff that eventually gets us to renewable energy. You know, nothing to see here, right? Now, here is what Chris Bowen had to say about, a rather interesting topic here, about particularly why China and the United States should just not fight about little old Taiwan. Don't worry about it. It's basically China's. This is John Kerry-esque.
In all the tensions between China and the United States, the one thing that's been ring-fenced up until now has been climate discussions. They've agreed they've got a lot to do to get it together. We want the world's two biggest emitters talking with each other. I do hope those talks are resumed and that suspension is lifted, because that is a blow, and it would be better if those talks resumed.
Now, remember 20 years ago when former Vice President Al Gore won an Academy Award for The Inconvenient Truth? Well, the title of that film is just as relevant today, but it's about the inconvenient truth of China and emissions. Now, as you know, Australia and the United States have both set their goals that by 2030, Australia cuts by 43% of 1% of the world's problem. The United States cuts 40% of its emissions by 2030. But of course, China doesn't have to do anything until 2030. China, which is a bigger, more polluting country than almost any in the world, and in fact, combined in 2021 with all developed nations, they don't have to do anything until 2030. So they will so whatever we save, they will match or double, right? Well, despite the fact that China's gone slightly down, this is on records, it's slightly down. And the expectation is that as it continues to modernise, it keeps going up. Which then, of course, brings us to the other little inconvenient truth here, which is Australia and the United States. But let's focus in on us. If the future is solar and wind, where is solar and wind made? Now, the wind turbine question is a little bit difficult to work out, but I can tell you when it comes to the solar, the percentage of solar panels that the entire world makes, guess what? How many of them, according to the International Energy Agency, part of the UN, is that, put simply, 80% of all of the solar panels in all of the world come from China. So, our climate policy is to reduce carbon while China can increase carbon, and we buy stuff from China to make it happen. Now, again, maybe that's why it's a one China policy. Maybe that's why Taiwan can just go and do its thing. Because in the end, we need our politicians to make Twitter happy. Our politicians need to fix 43% of 1% of the world's problem, while China gets bigger, richer, and dirtier.